and welcome to our lecture video for this week. So congratulations, first of all, we have made it to the final step in the process laid out for us in the Kennedy text for looking at diversity in an organization. So that's great news. So we've made it to this final step, which is basically it's the last step in a recursive process, a revolving process, right? We keep going through this again and again, but we're here sort of at this final piece, which is really great. So this week we're going to talk about more action. What does that mean? We've already talked about action in the context of the organization, in the context of setting diversity into motion in an organization. So now we talk about more action. What else can we do and how can we keep things going? So let's talk about what it means specifically for our contexts when we talk about more action. So when we talk about this, what we're really talking about is momentum, right? How do we keep things going? How do we keep energy focused positively on something? Now, as an example, we often think about momentum, not just in terms of diversity, but in terms of any sort of strategic initiative, plan, goal, anything, right? And we can talk about this from our own perspective, our own individual perspective, as well as an organization. So just think for a minute about a strategic plan or a strategic initiative, for example. Just think of one, right? Often what we find is, and evidence shows, that momentum is lost. So this forward thinking, this forward push is lost, which ultimately leads to the failure of the plan. Now, what's striking to me is that evidence shows that upwards of 95% of strategic initiatives, strategic plans will fail because there's no momentum to keep it going. I think that's striking to think about that. Almost all, basically, of our plans and our initiatives will fail because there's no momentum. Okay, so how do we make sure that what we do is in that 5%? How do we make sure that we're keeping momentum alive, that we're pushing forward? So Kennedy suggests some things for us to think about as we are trying to build this forward momentum and try to keep things going, okay? So she suggests 3 things for us to think about as we think about how we keep diversity initiatives going in an organization. The first, she says, is build a new energy source team. And what she means by that is really a cross-functional team that can look at diversity in the organization and specifically look at the actions and the goals set out by the organization and say, how do we keep this going? How do we make sure that we are pushing forward on this, not only as individuals, but as an organization? And she suggests in this process, as you put together these cross-functional teams in an organization, that you do so by asking 3 specific questions that will help focus the efforts of those teams. So again, how do we put these cross-functional teams together? How do we keep moving? What is the focus of their work? She says 3 things, 3 questions to help them kind of keep this going. The first is, what's going well to support putting our differences to work? So what is it that's a positive thing that is happening? What's happening well, and can we replicate that? So how do we keep it going? The second thing is, what do we need to do to revitalize personal involvement and commitment? So again, thinking about the individual level of perspective here. What do we do for individuals? How do we keep individuals engaged in this process? And then the last question is, how do we creatively go about it? How do we make sure that these things are actually happening, and how can we do it in a creative way? So that's building a new energy source team. Really a team to keep momentum alive around an initiative. The second thing she suggests is to start a new conversation. She contends that communication is one of the most important things in an organization, and starting that new conversation around diversity, around inclusion, is a really important step in this process. So how do we keep something moving forward? Well, we talk about it. We communicate, right? We are visual about things. We have this woven into our strategic plans and initiatives. So we start that new conversation. And lastly, she says, we may need to refresh our approach and create a revitalized vision. So we might need to think about, again, creatively, looking at how we keep something moving forward together. We have to articulate that in a really compelling and specific way. All right? So let's just take a moment and you'll brainstorm to yourself. We've talked about what motivates you, but what keeps what things keep you motivated and engaged? So how do you personally stay engaged in a goal? What is it that you can point to specifically for you personally that might keep you motivated, that might keep you engaged in something? And then secondly, what are some best practices from your own organizations around this? So what have your organizations done? What have your companies done that really have proven to be good examples of how we keep things going, how we keep things with some forward momentum? Again, this is going to help you think about both the individual level of perspective here and the organizational level of perspective. So we tie that into what you're going to write for this portion of the hat. So in this section, you're required to think ahead to a future state of your organization. The focus of this discussion, this last part of your hat paper, should be on how to maintain momentum for diversity and inclusion efforts in the organization. So how do we maintain this forward focus, this positively focused momentum? Well, you wouldn't know if the goals you described in the action section were met or not. Think generally about what kinds of initiatives, processes, or plans might keep employees engaged and moving towards the organization's diversity goals. So think about the things that keep yourself, that keep you engaged, that keep you wanting to push forward towards a goal. Think about that from your own perspective, from your own vantage point, and use that knowledge, use that experience to help guide you in this section. Think about what might motivate other employees. What's worked with you? What hasn't worked with you? Think about that. Maybe rely on different aspects of motivation and goal setting that we've talked about, either in this class or maybe in other classes, or maybe other books you've read or other materials that you've read, maybe in the work that you do from on a day-to-day basis. Think about those things and think about what specifically are those things, those initiatives, those processes, those plans that keep momentum moving forward. So this is the last section of your hat, which is, it's great. I hope you feel good having reached this point so far. And this really ties up the whole process that we've gone through. So this should be, this should sort of conclude what you're talking about and conclude the kind of this process that Kennedy has laid out for us. So again, good luck writing this section. I think you'll do well on this, and make sure that in this section you're tying this to the other things that you've talked about, tying this to the action section, tying this to achievement. Make sure that you're consistent all the way through your paper. Okay, good luck on this section.